Um, my mom, she would always show me like the musicals and the song and dance movies and like any film having to do with like social justice or racial injustice.
Hmm.
So like everything from like Lean on Me to Lilies of the Field to
Right.
Sound of Music,
Right.
like really like classic, like like Rebel Without a Cause, like James Dean,
Okay.
and like Streetcar Named Desire, and like these
Yes, ma'am.
really
Yes.
classic movies. And so it was just
Okay.
really cool. Like if I was hanging out with my dad, we were going to watch one movie, but if I was with my mom, it was going to be something different. And
Right.
then when I got old enough to understand, what movies were and like why I liked, going to the movies at like eight,
Hmm.
9, 10 or whatever, I
Hmm.
was always drawn to the big budget, like high energy action films. But
Right.
it can't just be, stupid films where it's, one liners and like nothing else is going on. It always had to do with something that was a little bit more sinister, whether
Hmm.
that be like a government conspiracy or an assassination gone wrong or some
Right.
sort of blackmail against like an innocent person that was trying to prove their innocence,
Hmm.
right? So like
Right.
The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, uh, Bad Boys, like the original Bad Boys, Armageddon, like all the Mike Bay stuff, uh,
Okay.
and then like all the Denzel stuff, like the Man on Fire and Training Day, and like
Right.
anything that was like I knew there was multiple cameras being used. I knew there
Right.
was like a ton of people behind the scenes for this like one explosion, and it
Right.
really fascinated me like how they were able to do that, and
Hmm.
nobody get injured, and like how they were able to make it look like it really does, right? Like a chase
Hmm.
scene, or like a car going off of a cliff, or any
Right.
of the Tom Cruise action movies, and like that stuff always like Beverly Hills Cop, like all those movies,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so, and like those were the movies that I was really drawn to when I was younger, and I wanted to emulate that when I
Okay.
got older and I started making my own movies.
All right. So tell me, what was the pivotal moment? We know we go through stages and we have an idea of what we want to do. What was the pivotal moment when you said action films? That's it. That's what I want to do.
It was sophomore year at college. I was undeclared at that time.
Hmm.
So freshman year, I had decided I wanted to maybe do movies. And so I
Hmm.
took an art of film and video class, and I officially declared film major sophomore year. And I had just seen this movie called Snatch for the first time, which is a Guy Ritchie movie.
Right.
And I love Guy Ritchie, and I had never heard of it. And I love movies where there's intersecting storylines and
Hmm.
there's multiple people that are about to collide together, where you wouldn't normally have that, right?
Right.
And I just love that, where you have like 6, 7 different leads and all these stories that are about to, get connected. And when I saw Snatch, I was like, okay, those are the kind of movies I want to make. I want to have like 5 or 6 different people that you're following. You don't know how they're all going to collide, but eventually it's going to reach that breaking point, and then the explosion, right, of like whatever the action is.
Right.
And I started doing like these really experimental action films where it would be like a fight sequence in the dorm room or a hallway. Then I
Okay.
would do like a car chase scene with my buddies where they'd be in one car and I'd be in my pickup truck, and we drive all through campus doing all this crazy stuff.
Nice, man.
Getting yelled at by campus security and the neighbors and everybody else. But
So you was in college doing this?
oh yeah, and you watch
Dang.
some of those movies. Like my films in college, I look at them as like really good learning experiences,
Uh-huh.
um, because like we're jumping the line, the audio's not there, people don't
Right.
know their lines. It's my buddies who are like, they're not actors, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? They're just my
Right.
homies,
Uh-huh.
and um, I loved it because it really helped me by the time I got to film school understand the amount of cameras that I would need for a setup,
Mhm.
understanding lighting and angles, right? Like how to make somebody feel inferior, shoot them from above. If I want to make them seem like they're, empowering and like, uh, kind of scary, shoot them from below, right? To
Right.
give them that menacing kind of thing. And it's
Mhm.
like learning how to basically utilize my lack of equipment or resources through the camera and through certain angles. And in action films, I think you can overshoot action sequences. And I think in
Mhm.
today's world, people get like really caught up in the editing as opposed to the actual scene itself. Because like
Okay.
you don't need like 8 different camera angles and like 30 cuts like a music video in a minute sequence, right? Like you can
Right.
create that tension, like Children of Men. That's one of my favorite action movies. The
Okay.
amount of like slow moving tracking shots in that film where you're just waiting for something to happen and that
Mhm.
tension is building,
Right.
and you compare that to like Enemy of the State, which is another film I love. Tony Scott,
Yes.
amazing action director. Hey,
Yes.
he's got like 5, 6, 7 cameras rolling, whenever there's something going on. and there's a rhythm to that kind of style. And so it's like I wanted to marry, those styles of like the frenetic editing with those more slower build-up scenes.
Okay.
And once I did my first short film, it was about a college drug dealer, and it was like a 15-minute film. And that one didn't even have a lot of action in it. It was like my next two films that I really started to push it. And then by the time I got to film school, I made like two action films and a romantic comedy, because I love romance films and I love rom-coms.
Really?
Yeah,
That's like
I
two
know.
spectrums. Yeah.
But it's always like, like I said, my mom would always show me these classic love stories. And
Mm,
if you do a rom-com right, like it's really special. Like my best friend's wedding, Julia Roberts, like
I
I
love it.
remember seeing that when I was a kid, and it's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, that's a really good movie, because it's not just about, two people that are going to maybe fall in love. It's about, friendship, loyalty,
Right.
respect, and like how you're able to, relate to this horrible character, because Julia Roberts is horrible in that movie. And it's like you're really hoping that she ends up with the dude, even though she's ruining Cameron Diaz's life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that always fascinated me. Like, how do you relate to, those characters that maybe aren't as likable, or that you shouldn't
Uh-huh.
be supporting? Um,
Okay. So what do you think about one of my favorites? The first Matrix. What do you think
love it.
about movies like that?
I love it. Like in terms of the sci-fi world, Matrix, Star Wars, Star Trek.
Mhm.
There's a movie, Snowpiercer, about
Yes.
this. Okay, like I love any type of movie where you're taking like society and you're showing us what it could potentially turn into if we
Yeah.
don't learn how to check ourselves now.
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And
Uh-huh.
like the Matrix was mind blowing. I remember going to see Matrix 2 and 3 at like the midnight openings
Yeah.
um, in high school. And it was like, but that first Matrix, like mind blowing. And the way they did the slow motion, the bullet time sequences, the
Right.
the amount of practical effects in that shootout sequence before they go take the building at the end, when
Mhm.
he walks through that metal detector and he opens up his trench coat and he's got
Yeah.
all those guns, and
Yes.
then it hits that slow mo shot of him knocking the guard, and then it's just
Uh-huh.
like chaos. Like that scene, if I can do that scene when I do that scene, I
Uh-huh.
can't wait. Like that is my like that's like the pinnacle of what I want to create, is a scene like that, because
Okay.
you're combining the slow motion with the fast action, and it's all
Right.
practical. There's no visual effects. Like they're really firing rounds, destroying
Mhm.
those pillars, and you're watching all those like walls explode, and it's like I'd rather do something that's more practical and special effects heavy than
Mhm.
visual effects. Because to me, a lot of visual effects doesn't look as believable as I think people think it does, you
Uh-huh.
know?
Mhm.
And I would rather really blow up a building, or like blow up like five cars in a lane, as opposed to showing you like, eight different, buildings, exploding at the same time when it really didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Right. So what would you tell someone who's really on a budget, a small budget, and want quality like fight scenes, like, and
Yeah.
no experience?
Yeah, no, with no experience, I would say look at your favorite action sequences that you're trying to emulate that don't
Mhm.
require additional vehicles or personnel or extras.
Right.
Essentially, strip down the scene to who is fighting who. Is it one on one? Is it 1v2? Is it 2v3? Whatever that number is, when you find out your core people that are fighting. And
Mhm.
then I would suggest to do a single location. And so, what I mean by that is the kitchen, a bathroom, a locker room, some place where you can control every element of that sequence, where
Right.
nobody else is going to bother you. So in this movie Rewind, we really didn't have a budget, and I wanted to do like three different action sequences. The first sequence that we did was a kitchen fight sequence. It's literally these two dudes just tearing up the kitchen with
Okay.
like a butter knife and like, no real other tools. And I thought back to The Bourne Identity. I love those movies. The
Mhm.
first, the first Bourne Identity, it's him in like really close quarter action sequences
Mhm.
where it's like him versus one or two people, and then that's it, right? Like
Mhm.
he disarms the police when you meet him, then he breaks out of the embassy, then he's like in a room. In Bourne Supremacy, the second one, he literally kills a guy with a magazine rolled up
I remember. I
in the
remember
kitchen.
that.
Okay, so like this is a $30 million movie, and one of the dopest sequences in Born Supremacy is this newspaper or magazine. In the first Born Identity, he kills that assassin with a pin. He stabs dude like 8 times with a pin, then the
Right.
dude jumps out of the window. Okay,
Uh-huh.
that's one room and two dudes, and they're doing
Okay.
like the craziest choreography you can imagine. So I would tell
Right.
anybody, choreograph, choreograph, and get you people that don't mind doing it like 50 times.
Okay.
Because you're gonna have like, maybe 2 cameras if you're lucky. If you have 3 cameras, great, because that way you
Mhm.
can pick up from all the different angles that you want, and you don't have to keep having them redo it. For
Right.
Rewind, we had 2 cameras, so it literally took us like 12 hours to
Okay.
do a 45-second sequence.
Wow. Is that usual?
No, I mean, I think if we'd had additional cameras
Hmm.
and actual stunt performers that knew how to do the choreography, the hardest
Right.
part was getting the moves down to make it look believable. Because a lot of
Okay.
fight sequences, if you don't have a real choreographer or stunt coordinator, it looks a little bit forced or fake because you don't really
Right.
want to hurt each other. Whereas
Right.
if you have stunt performers and you can really throw punches, maybe somebody does accidentally get nicked in the chin, or
Right.
an elbow might hit you on the forehead, but it's
Right.
all because we're trying to do this scene, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, I would just try and get one location and very passionate people that want to do this sequence with you.
Okay. So can you tell us a little about your current project?
Yeah, so Rewind is actually the most current narrative short that I have, and that one I'm trying to do. Well, I plan to do as my first feature film, and so the short is a proof of concept that I recut over the summer, and it's like a 5-minute proof of concept, but it showcases the world and these 2 individuals that are going at it, essentially over a government conspiracy, and this guy being a secret assassin, but he's had his memory wiped, and so he can't remember anything that he's involved in. So it's got a little bit of Memento in there, mixed with like a
Right.
little bit of Born Identity and a little bit of
Okay.
Total Recall, because we're dealing with like a government control and like not having control over your own self. Um, on
Now, is
the
there a trail of that on your website?
Yeah, so the film is actually on my website. It's the
And
first video that pops up.
what's your
And
website,
say again,
Justin? What's your website?
my website is www.justinbellow.com.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
then on the reality side, I have a sports docu series that I just finished production on, and
Mhm.
that deals with a youth football team in LA. And it's following the team. They're a youth football team, so they're 11 to 13, 6 to 8th graders, and essentially their entire schedule is built around their football schedule. So they have
Mhm.
like 2 hours of normal class, and then the rest of the day is for strength and conditioning. And so these
Okay.
kids will sometimes take a redshirt year for 8th grade and stay back to get bigger
Right.
and stronger and faster, so they can get recruited to a D1 high school and then
Okay.
D1 college. And so I just finished production on that. I directed it, produced it, edited, and was a camera operator. And
Really?
then
Wow.
yeah, and then last year I directed my first TV series, which was a um, competition reality show about cryptocurrency. So it was like Shark Tank for crypto
Whoa.
influencers.
Okay. Where can we see these things? Can the public see
Yeah,
any
I
of
can
this?
give you it's called the Next Crypto Gym, and that's available on Insight TV. I can drop it in the chat.
Okay. Drop it in the chat, please.
Yeah, I'll send you the link there, and then I can send you the link to the pilot. That's private, like it's on my Vimeo.
Okay.
We're just taking it out right now, but for Next Crypto, you can definitely watch it right now on Insight TV.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah,
And Justin, any oh, I have another question before we do that question.
yeah.
What do you think is needed more of in your field? Like the stunt, is there diversity, need more diversity, like in the acting department? What do we
Um,
need more of in your department?
yeah. I mean, specifically for action films, I think it would be best if people were a little bit more inclined to want to work with a first-time filmmaker in terms of like a first-time feature filmmaker.
Right.
A lot of the time for action films, where it requires a lot of personnel and a lot of crew and a lot of stunt people, you're gonna want to go with somebody that's done it on that scale before, just
Right.
because of the amount of time and energy it takes to pull off these sequences. So if you have a first-time filmmaker, and I say that like first-time feature filmmaker, right? Like I've never made a feature. I've made TV and shorts and music videos and commercials. But when you make that jump to features, a lot of the time with producers and production companies, they're not picking you because you don't have the talent, or they don't think you could do it. It's more or less a question of security and understanding that the person that we may hire has done this like 7 other times, and
Right.
they've done all of the sequences and the ideas that you're pitching, right? So like they've done 4 car chases, they've blown up multiple buildings, they've had 7 people in a fight sequence with like 50 extras outside on a street, and then
Right.
like explosions going off and squibs, and it's like you have to account for a lot of time, obviously mistakes, everything that will go wrong, everything that
Mhm.
could go wrong will probably go wrong, right? And
Yes.
you want to work with somebody that knows how to pivot and maneuver. And
Mhm.
a lot of the time with first time feature directors, when you're doing an action film, it's just it's hard to be able to get that support just because you haven't done it yet, right? So it's like you need like somebody to like kind of take a chance on wanting to let you go out and do that route.
Right.
And in terms of that diversity aspect, I think, a lot of the films that I've seen, there was always a good amount of representation in those films, right? Like the Denzel action movies, whether it's Man on Fire or, Unstoppable or, Enemy of the State with Will Smith, or you had, Lethal Weapon with, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson back in the day. Like the first
Right.
action movie I ever saw was Lethal Weapon with my dad. And it was like, okay, well, that's the representation is right there, right? You had black cops, Mexican cops, white
Right.
cops.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot, and in a lot of the newer action films, it's a lot different races, right? Like you have, like, there's a really great movie called The Raid. You ever seen that?
The Raid, no. Tell me
Okay,
about that.
you got to check out The Raid. The Raid is a film by this, I believe he's a Welsh director, and it is one of the craziest action movies I've ever seen. And there's a sequel called Raid 2 Redemption, but
Okay.
it's about this police crew that goes into this building to take out this drug lord. And it's
Mhm.
literally one location, and they just have to go floor by floor until they get to the drug dealer at the top to take him out. But it's like
Okay.
nonstop action. You're in hallways, you're in rooms, you're literally in single room locations, and it's just
Right.
carnage. It's hand
Sounds
to
like
hand.
a video game.
It is. It kind of is when you're watching it. There's a lot of gunplay and a lot of mixed martial arts. And
Okay.
so I think the more include like the mixed martial arts components along
Mhm.
with the gunplay, like the John Wick films, now,
Right. Right.
um, the more diversity is going to come just because of the people that are specializing in that, right? And
Right.
that just opens up the door to everybody, right?
Okay.
One of my favorite female action movies, Atomic Blonde, with Charlize Theron.
Saw that. Yes.
That movie was
Awesome.
cold.
Yeah.
Colombiana with Zoe Saldana, right?
Yes. Yes.
Salt with Angelina Jolie. Like
Yes.
those movies are like really well done, and it's like anybody can do anything they want now, right?
So do you ever think about doing a femme fatale film?
In all my films, honestly, like there's always a femme fatale or like
Okay.
a female component to the
Mhm.
action. Um, so like for Rewind, it's like there's two females that are going to end up battling each other towards the end of the film because
Okay.
one female is trying to convince our lead that she's really his wife in real life, even though his memory's been wiped, and this other person is lying to him and is like a double agent. And so
Okay.
I like having really strong female characters. For another film that I have, it's called All Is Fair. It's about two spies that fall in love. It's like Mr. and Mrs. Smith back in the day. And
Okay.
these spies don't tell each other that they're really spies.
Mhm.
And they don't talk to each other for like 4 years. And they end up at a wedding together investigating the same guy. But again, it's like you're going to have this girl and guy go head to head against each other. It's not just going to be girls fighting girls or guys fighting guys. It's no,
Right.
it's everybody going at it. It's like
I like that.
the lady in John Wick, in the first John Wick, Adrian Palicki, who fights John Wick in his hotel room.
Yes.
I want shit like that, right? Where it's like, it doesn't matter what you look like, what you identify as. Like, if you're a badass, you badass. You know what
That's
I'm saying?
right. I like
So,
that. So tell me about your technique. Does your technique differ? Do you have any like in comparison to like John Wick or The Matrix? Do you have a technique that you like or style?
yeah, like I think I love having a series of inserts play at a rapid pace to establish the psychological component of a character.
Okay.
So whenever I do an action movie, I'm trying to get you into the head of this person and or the enemy that they're facing. And so inserts to me tell you an enormous amount of information about a character without having to have the character explain themselves to someone or like a scene of exposition. So if you have a character, loading a gun, eating breakfast, exercising, and you can tell that through a series of inserts, and you're telling the audience specific information to remember. I always go back to a film called Requiem for a Dream by Darren Aronofsky.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
that movie was one of the hardest films I think I ever had to go through in college, and I rewatch it like once a year now, just
Mhm.
because of the amount of edits that are in it, the shot selection, and the style, and how he's able to get you into the head of each one of these characters as they descend into like chaos. And so it's like I look at him, I look at Guy Ritchie because he uses inserts a lot to explain a scene, as opposed to like watching two people go to the airport, get on a plane, and then a shot of a plane taking off. What does Guy Ritchie do? It's like a shot of a cab speeding up to the exit. Somebody pops aspirin, the on-air sign lights up, you hear the plane take off, and then you're out. And it's like through a sound effect and multiple inserts, you've told me a scene in like 10 seconds, which normally could take like 2 minutes, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's like I'm trying to cut down on the time and create that pacing through the inserts
Uh-huh.
without overdoing it. Because if you do too many, then it's like a music video, and then it's
Mhm.
just really like images to song, and that really doesn't explain a lot. It's more like a style thing, right?
Right.
You're basically doing it to be stylized for the sake of being stylized, as opposed to you're doing it to convey something about the character or the
Mhm.
emotion or what's going on in the scene. And so my style is like a combo of like you know. Really slow, methodical moments with the character
Mhm.
where you're not sure what they're going to do, but we're not going to cut. We're just going to sit there with them for a second. And
Uh-huh.
then once that action starts, then it's off to the races. Like it could be very, very fast, or it could be, again, like I like to ramp it up for a second, then I like to slow it down so you can breathe with them for a moment and then right back into that action.
Now
And so,
look,
like,
I watched 2 snippets on your website,
yeah,
and it blew. I love stuff like that. It just
thank
kept my brain going like this.
you.
I love the psychological aspect of your work.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're welcome.
that's definitely what I'm trying to go for. And I think when I was younger, I was more in love with like dialogue and like conversations between characters, even
Mhm.
though my conversations weren't as good as I thought they were. And
Right.
it's like the older I've gotten and the more I've worked, it's like finding that, balance between having these people say a lot without talking too much.
Okay. I
You
got
know what
that.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like
I get that.
you can convey a lot in just a look or a
Yeah.
pause, as opposed to people just rambling all the time.
Yeah.
And so it's like finding that nice balance between, not giving too much information
Mhm.
and just giving like people like little breadcrumbs so they can catch on.
Okay. I like that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope, we could do a part 2.
Whenever. I'm down whenever, for sure.
Okay, and you're based in LA, and can you give us your website one more time?
Yeah, it's www.justinbellow.com.
Okay, guys, Justin Bellow here, the great Justin Bellow. Look out for him and his new project, Rewind.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, guys. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Corona.